Welcome to WDEX, the Wired Differently Experience. My name's Todd Saylor, and I am the author of the book, The Brand and the Attitude Wired Differently. And my job is to inspire you. My job is to motivate you. My job is to love you. And the show's job is to challenge the status quo, right? To dare you not to be average. And your job is to be, do, and think differently. Well, so come on, let's do this thing called life. Let's get it on Wired Differently. Today's show is pretty exciting. Worked real hard on it. Let me get the banner up here. Iterate, only two makes in life. And I loved Stretch Armstrong. Iterate, only two makes in life, and I love Stretch Armstrong. I love my titles. I like working around and making people think, and I know there's a football game going on, but hey, if I get 5 people, if I get 50, it's amazing, and we're already there, so thank you for that. I want you to understand, I don't see your comments. I got those turned off, and I answer all of them after the show, so make sure you give me comments, give me questions, DM me. I love it, and I appreciate all that you're doing, but I want to talk to you today a little bit about a special thing, because I want you to know that the show today is going to be based around 6 progress moves. 6 progress moves. Yeah, we're going to talk about 6 moves that you need to make progress in business and in life. I love crossing life and business. I mean, I think that's the uniqueness of this show that I do, my entrepreneurial mindset. But I want to start off with a story. I want to start off with something, meaningful. And I would kind of always do that, right? So there's only 2 makes in life. There's only 2 makes in life. I want you to understand there's only 2 makes. God only made 2 makes. The world only has 2 makes. Life only has 2 makes. And there's only 2 makes, right? You're going to only be making progress, or you're going to be making excuses. And I don't want you making excuses. I want you making progress. And so I want to do a show about, well, hey, I can tell you to make progress, not excuses, but I want to talk to you about how to make progress. And so I hung out with Elon Musk for the last 3 weeks or so and been dabbling in his stuff over time. And what an amazing man, the richest man on the planet. Interesting man, and I crossed some of his thought processes of making progress with my thought processes, and we blended them together to come up with a cocktail, and I'm eager to share those progress making moves with you. But before we get there, I got to confess something. I almost blew my entire speech by not making progress this week. If I don't own it, I'm condoning it. So I got to tell you, I had an opportunity to speak to some Pakistani people over the last several months, and I've been watching them on the messenger, and they've been talking to me, and I kind of vetted them out. And there's some kind of stuff going on out there in the world, and you never wonder what's kind of going on. But these people kept coming back to me and sending me images of their Christian ways in Pakistan, and they started to talk to me, and I talked with them, and it turned out that they were a real group, and they were into Wired Differently, and they loved the messages, and they just wanted me to speak. They wanted me to speak in Pakistan and through the Zoom, and I thought, oh, I can do that. And then I just kept finding ways not to do it, right? I kept making excuses of not why to do it, instead of progressing my brand, instead of progressing the message, instead of moving forward. I was actually found myself honestly searching for reasons not to do it. I was too busy. I was just covered up, and the Zoom wasn't working, and the meshing wasn't working. The connection wasn't going to be there, and there's all this and that. And every time it came around for me to actually communicate with them, I found a reason not to do it. Well, I didn't know I was finding reasons not to do it, but I just found reasons not to do it. And if there's only 2 makes in life, to make progress or to make excuses, then I was doing the one that was the worst. I was making excuses. And I don't want you to be excuse makers. I mean, I think this whole message could actually be built around this idea of progress or excuses, because this whole country is kind of melding over and finding reasons and problems and excuse for this, and not to follow Biden, and to love Trump, to hate Trump, to follow Biden, everything becomes political, and we make excuses for the way we're thinking. We make excuses for the way our people act. And stop it. we only want to be making progress. And so we need to pull back a little bit and try and figure out where we can make progress in life, not where we're going to make excuses for people and thoughts. I mean, only deal with the things that you can control. And here I am going off on a tangent again, but I want you to understand there's only two makes in life, and you're either going to make progress or you're going to make excuses. And I stopped making excuses. I got up at 5 a.m. and I said, yes, Bishop Asif, yes, Nazareth, I will speak at 7 a.m. in Pakistan. And I got to tell you, the fact that I went the progress route, the fact that I didn't make excuses, the fact that I got up and wrote a speech out of Jeremiah, the 3 endings expected by God for them, and blended it in with the wire differently, 3 stages, was amazing. I learned more from them. I mean, you got to understand, there was people, as many as almost 20, that walked as much as 2 hours, found a way to get to hear me live at this place of worship. But it's more important than that. I mean, I think you need to understand. They're being persecuted in Pakistan for a religious belief. And we worry about our taking of guns, and we worry about our losing our right to be on Twitter and Facebook, and we worry. And I'm not saying that that's wrong to not be concerned about that, because I don't like that either. But I got to tell you, they were telling me just not 3 weeks ago, 2 of their friends were burned alive for worshiping Christ. I mean, think about that. That's horrific. I've never even fathomed something like that. And they're reaching out for me to share the truth, to share them some hope, to share them the wire differently energy. They said, we love your energy, Mr. Todd. We love your energy. So I did the show. It was great. I learned more scripture. I learned from them, and they were blessed, and they were clapping. And I got to tell you, I stretched myself. I didn't find excuses at the end. And this is what I want to challenge you with. So I want to make the crossover right now. I want you to understand that it's important that you understand there's only 2 makes in life. You're either going to make progress or you're going to make excuses. And where are you at right now? I guess you can think about it right now before we get going. Are you making excuses for something, or are you making progress for something? Are you sitting at home? Are you getting out there? Are you finding ways to get things done? Quit making excuses. We can't let the COVID, we can't let this world, we can't let the blockers, we can't the haters, we can't get the deniers, we can't let any of these people get in our way. We have got to make progress. We're wired differently, and we will choke, we will gag, we will asphyxiate ourselves if we aren't moving forward. Now, here I go again. I don't know what happens to me. I wish sometimes I could just stay on task, but I can't, because you're either making progress or making excuses. And I got to tell you, I was making excuses, and I don't want you making excuses. So let's get to the 6 progresses. Let's figure out how we can do it. Let's talk about Elon Musk and how he did it. We're going to cross these over. So the number one thing I want to talk to you about is critical work. So here we go. We got critical work. The number one thing with progress, the idea of me being successful, the idea of you being successful, not only in business, but in life, is we got to get under this concept that critical work requires critical starts. Everybody gets up in the morning. We all start off even. The clock goes off. You're either up early or up late, but when you wake up, the day starts. And I want you to understand, sure, you've thought about these things, but my job is just to bring it up a little differently. My job is to help you understand a little differently that critical work requires critical starts. Well, my mom made me make my bed every day when I was a little boy, and I'm glad she did that, because to this day, I get one thing done before 6 or 7 o'clock every day, and I make the bed. And my wife's very grateful for it, because she doesn't like making the bed. I don't like making it, but the bed gets made every day. After that, the day flows. Get cleaned up, do what you got to do, but you've got to get in a passion mode for critical work requires critical starts. What's critical for you? What is your most critical work for the day? What are you focusing on right away? Because as leaders, we're required to do our MITs first. What's an MIT? MIT is most important task. Because think about it. If we get the most important task done at the front end of the day, the rest is almost a gravy train. We're working on things for the next day. But more importantly, the most important task, 1, you got to know what your most important task is. And 2, you got to get that stuff done. But let me tell you something. The MIT is critical because that's the most important task of the day, and that's releasing other people to get on with their day. You're generally given your family directives. You're generally given your workers directive. And if you're one of the workers, you got to give other people directive. And if not anyone else, then you got to give yourself directive. Release yourself of the most important task of the day immediately. These are tricks. I mean, Elon Musk does it. I do it. There's one of the things that we aligned. I'm going to confess some things that he says he should be doing, and I should be doing a better job of. But I think it's exciting to understand how the most successful guy in the world aligns with me and how you and I align. I mean, think about progress. Think about Elon Musk. I mean, here's a guy that built the first electric car, sent a rocket ship up into space many times. We're going to talk about that. Built PayPal and becomes the most wealthy man in the world. And I will tell you this, that your progress moments are just as important as sending a rocket to the moon or Mars. Your progress moments are just as important as inventing the first electric car. I'm just telling you, are the most important thing. You are the best at the craft you have in the world. And I want you to own that. Elon Musk will tell you the same thing. You're very important, and your critical requirements, your MITs are just as important as his. And so don't think that just because Todd's somewhere else and doing something, and by the way, look at this background, huh? Right? I changed it up. We'll talk about that later. And I think number 3. But the point of the matter is your critical work requires critical starts, right? And I want the MIT done and done right and get it on down the road, right? Each day starts the same. You wake up, and if you don't wake up, well, it ain't gonna matter, right? So here we go. Most important task: address. So I want you to understand the next thing, because now you've attached the critical work, and it requires a critical start, and you understand that each day starts that way. I want you to understand you're gonna be dealing with people with your emails and your conversations, and I want you to understand that now. I want you to understand the importance of what we call a feedback loop. See, a feedback loop is something that I think we're all aware of, but I don't think a lot of people think about it, right? A feedback loop is critical for the success of your business, your job, even your life and your relationships. A feedback loop. Title of this point is Loop 'em all. Loop 'em all. Hey, Tracy, loop 'em. Loop them all, Courtney, Kendra, Carol, loop them all. I even tell my employees, find your feedback, right? What is your loop feedback structure? Well, if you don't know what that is, that's this whole particular situation where you have people that are giving you feedback with your critical work. They're giving you feedback on your critical work. And I know they're called critics on critical feedback, but they're feedback loops. They are people or measures put in place to help you become better. But here's the thing. Feedback loops are essential, but they can hurt you or help you. And I want you to understand, here's where Elon Musk, or someone like Elon Musk, that's a little bit braver than me in some regards, and I'm just a little more tender, but he will tell you, don't tell me what you like. Tell me what you don't like. And I agree with him 100%. Matter of fact, I got to tell you, this show, I get a lot of critics. I'm trying not to be sensitive, but I need your feedback. Please give me feedback, but don't tell me what you like. Tell me what you don't like, Chad. Oh, wait, you're already doing that. All right. Tell me what you don't like, Chad. Chad, you know who you are. Well, anyways, Chad didn't like my background. Well, and to be honest, Chad was like one of 3 people that said the background was cool, Todd, but it was too much movement. And he's a feedback loop. And so I took his feedback, which was negative, and I ran it across some other people, and they said they had the same challenge. And I said, you know what? I have the same challenge too. That's a good example of feedback loop. Loop them all. Find people that aren't going to be yes man, and they're going to tell you what they don't like. Now, if you're me, I still need to hear some things that you do like, because I'm a praise-motivated individual. You need to know who you are, okay? So once you understand the critical work and the MIT and you got your feedback loop in place, it's important. Push them. Push them, because now things are going to start to work into this reasoning process. Now you've got your critical work, and now you've got your feedback. And now I want you to start thinking like me and Elon Musk, because this is one of the things that we really do have in common. It's called first principle reasoning. Now, first principle reasoning is an amazing thought process that you probably already all know. And it's based more, or it's rooted more in like physics and logic and physics and geometry and some of the mathematical skill sets that we grew up learning in high school and maybe some of us in college. But first principle reasoning is basically the basic assumption that can't be deduced from any other proposition. It's the only sure thing in a complex problem. Now, that's a big load there, and I'm going to break it down for you. So this is really the first real technical thing I want to bring you aware of, because when you want to move forward and you want to be progressive in your mindset, right? We're going to talk about that. And you want to be not making excuses, but you want to be progressing, making progress, not excuses. I wanted you to understand and to be very clear that the first principle reasoning thought process is a basic assumption that can't be deduced from any other proposition. It's the only sure thing in a complex problem. It's reasoning rather by previous experience, but from the ground up. So it's this idea. It's this idea of not just looking at how the last person solved the problem. And by the way, I want to make it very clear to you that really the only reason we're here on this planet in many, many regards is to solve problems. I mean, why differently people solve problems? You're solving problems every day. Every day there's some type of problem or situation or issue that you have to solve. And these things we're talking about, just practical ways for leaders like yourself and parents and husbands and wives to actually break down and to do the 6 progress moves to become more successful in all these things. So we need to embrace the fact that basically everything we do in this world around us is solving problems. And here's how we're doing it, with the first principle of reasoning. So I want you to understand a basic assumption that can't be deduced from any other proposition. I popped it up there for you. It's the only sure thing in a complex problem. It's reasoning rather than previous experience, but from ground up. So I want you to understand that now we've created this whole workflow of our MIT, and we created this feedback loop, and now we have this process. Like, for instance, Elon Musk. He had this process, right? And he went over to Russia, and he was going to buy a rocket ship. And he says, I need a rocket ship because I'm going to shoot a rocket off into space. We're going to create all these connections, and we're going to do all these things. And he had this first principle of reasoning. But when he got to Russia, what do you think he found? He found rockets. He found one rocket, millions of dollars. He found another rocket, millions of dollars. Man, they even offered him a nuclear rocket. I mean, I don't even know how that worked out. And I remember reading about it. Elon, I think, just kind of laughed and said, whoa. We don't need any nuclear rockets here. But after he got done thinking about it, he went into his first principle reasoning mindset. He says, well, why would I buy two rockets, a rocket for $2 million, or certainly not a nuclear rocket? Why would I do that when, hey, let's break it down to the root. Let's take it all the way to the basic core of the proposition and thinking. Let's figure out the surest thing, the most experience. Let's not do it like everybody else. Let's just take it down to the bottom. Why don't we just build one? I know it's not revolutionary to a lot of people, but why not make a donut from scratch? Why go buy it from somebody else and ice it and sell it on a truck, right? But at least think about it. I want to stretch your mind in that regards. I want you to think about first base. So don't just do what the last person did on YouTube. Don't just do what the last person did, failed, or just go off of those things. I need you to escape that mind of thinking. I want you to erase the status quo. I want you to bring it all the way back down to the idea of deduced from any other proposition. I want your root thinking. How can I do it differently? That's what I want you to understand. First principle thinking. And speaking of stretching, I want you to understand that that's the actual fourth principle I want to talk to you about of moving and progressing is stretch Armstrong goals. Stretch goals. Stretch Armstrong, because now we've stretched ourselves. We've had first principle thinking, and we got all this feedback loops coming back at us. And now I want you to understand that you need to stretch your mind. You need to stretch your goals. I don't want your goals to be something everyone else would have. I need stretch Armstrong goals. So the reason I get so excited about stretch Armstrong and stretch Armstrong goals is when I was a little kid, I was given a toy called Stretch Armstrong. You know, and I was probably 9 or 8. My brother was probably 6 or 5, and he would grab one arm and I would grab the other arm, and we would just stretch this dude, man. I loved Stretch Armstrong. We'd take his arms, we'd take his legs, and we'd just torment this dude. We'd stretch him, but he would always snap back. He was always stretching elastic. And it was just a remarkable toy. And I think about that now when I set goals. I think about stretch. Man, I literally, as a little boy, slept with Stretch Armstrong. And I will tell you this, Elon Musk and myself were aligned with stretch goals. I mean, stretch goals, think about it. Stretch goals are meant for stretching us. Stretch goals are not normal goals. They're not normal dreams. They're not normal things. Right? Can you imagine Henry Ford? I mean, here's the problem with the world as we see it. And if you really think about stretch goals, can you imagine being a pilgrim on the Mayflower coming across and actually seeing an airplane? That would have been called witchcraft, right? I mean, matter of fact, can you imagine a pilgrim coming over on the Mayflower and finding the internet in a Apple device? It's not even a goal. It's not even a fathom. It's not even witchcraft. It's inconceivable. All these things come from stretch goals. And you don't have to be Elon Musk. You don't have to be an entrepreneur like Todd Saylor. You just need to be you. Because everyone has different increments of stretch. Every increment, the smallest increment, the largest increment, wherever your appetites for stretching an increment, as long as it's progress, you're building you. You're building a better you. You're building a better foundation. And I will tell you this, that's the most important thing you can do. Even if it's 1% or 0.5% a day, progress versus excuses is always going to be the better make of the two. Henry Ford said, hey, I'm gonna build a car, and it's gonna be inexpensive and it's gonna be reliable. And my great grandfather Hank said, well, what's wrong with the horse? Now, I'm not making fun of my great grandfather Hank, but he loved his horses. He plowed his fields. He built the biggest hog farm in the state of Michigan God ever seen or created. The Euclides over there. There was nothing wrong with the horse. Nothing. But Henry Ford said, I'm going to build a car that's reliable and inexpensive, and that's that. Stretch Armstrong goal. What are your stretch goals? Run a little farther, work a little longer, create that nest egg to buy your first house, and maybe it's a $200,000 house, and you can even fathom maybe a $100,000 house right now. It doesn't matter. I need stretch goals from you. I need you to be Stretch Armstrong goals. I need you to go down to the store and see if you can buy a Stretch Armstrong today or tonight or tomorrow and bring it home and put it on the mantle of your fireplace or your lamp or your dresser. I need a Stretch Armstrong in your damn house. I need Stretch Armstrong on your brain all day, all night. And I know that you can do it. I love my job, but I think it's important that you understand these things, because once you got the Stretch Armstrong goals, you're already there to what we call the set your mind to growth. Number 5, and we're almost there. Number 5, stretch your mind to growth. And how many times have you heard me speak about your mind? How many times have you heard me speak about your mind? Your mind, your mind, your mind. I'm never going to stop talking to you about your mind. Set your mind to growth. These wires that wrap around this motor here is your brain, and those are your thoughts, and that's you setting your mind to growth. Every time you wrap a thought around your brain, you're setting your mind to growth. You can do this. I know I make a big deal out of this stuff, and it's only because it's worked for me, and it's worked for so many more people that are much more even successful than me. These people know if you can condition and train your mind for success and growth, it will happen. And it starts by wrapping positive thoughts around your mind and your brain. Set your mind to growth. I want you to take the approach that maybe you're wrong, right? But actually less wrong. See, failure is actually an option here. So iterate until you get it right. This is where Elon and I have just kind of missed each other, at least in the first part of my life. It was very hard for me. I mean, I never wanted to hear no. I never wanted to see failure. I feared failure desperately through high school and even college. Failure was just the worst thing to me. In some ways, it drove me. But I'll tell you what, by the time I got older and I got married and started building companies, it was the worst curse on me ever because I feared failure so much that I restricted my ways. I was feared failure so much that I wouldn't have stretch goals. I feared failure so much that I just didn't even completely ever think about the concept of first principles. It just restricted my success in my life and my leadership capabilities. But it wasn't until I was willing to dare to fail before I started to be successful in businesses. The first business, the second business, the third business, I dared to fail. And some of them failed. A lot of things failed. But it wasn't until I was willing to embrace failure as an option, right? To start looking at things that I was, look at things that I was doing were wrong, but maybe less wrong. It wasn't until failure was actually the option, until I understood that as failure happens, iterate. And that's what we do. That's what Elon must do. And that's what you must do. Even in life, even in family, even in raising children, even in your hobbies, you need to understand that stretch goals and that your mindset needs to be set to growth. Because if you're not setting your mind to growth, where is it being set to? If you're not purposefully setting your mind to growth, where is it being set to? You are responsible for your own mind. You are the only person in the planet, in the world, in the history that will ever, you are responsible for your own mind, and you need to set it for growth, damn it. I don't want it to be set for anything other than growth. I want the ants gone. I want all that other crap gone. I want you to only set your mind for growth, even if it's a little growth. I just want sustainable growth. I don't want excuses. I want you to make progress, not excuses. Please set your mind for growth. Where can you start right now, right today, to start setting your mind for growth? What's on your mind right now that you're trying to make excuses to not do that could actually make you grow in progress? You can do this. And once you've mastered those things, or at least you started to consider those things, I want you to understand the last and most important move for progress is the communication mastery. So you've got all these things we've put together, and communication mastery is probably the most important, because we learned that last week that empathy is a waste of emotion if it's not shared, right? Empathy is, if we don't share, we can care all day long, but if we don't share, and if we've got all these things figured out, critical work, your MIT, your Lupum, your first principle, and we got your Stretch Armstrong hanging around with you, you got your mindset on growth. But if you don't learn how to communicate, your own mastery of your own communication, how you're going to communicate to your wife, your husband, how are you going to communicate to your children? Listen, I've blown that 100 times plus one. How are you going to communicate? I want you to master the communication. Work at your communication. And here's a couple things that I think you need to understand for mastering your communication. One, I want you to schedule. You got a calendar. If you're still doing it old school, write it down. But if you got your iPhone, use that device, man. That thing is amazing. Your Google phone or whatever you got out there. Get in there and schedule half-hour increments, schedule hour increments, schedule dinner with your wife, schedule dinner with your husband, schedule your kids' baseball games, schedule your kids' piano lessons. You put it all down. Force yourself to schedule every increment of your life the most possible way you can do. It's a discipline that we need to do, and it's one that I need to do better at, but it's changed my life, scheduling and forcing myself to put everything on a schedule. Because here's why. Because once we put it on a schedule, it's a finite. It's finite. It's in writing. It's carved out. And now you're doing what that says to do. But if you don't put it in a schedule, it leaves that room for wishy-washy. I need to get better at that. And I want to challenge you to get better. The other thing I want to tell you about communication mastering is this great word I learned from Elon Musk. Actually, it's called asynchronous communication. I want you to master asynchronous communication. I want you to understand asynchronous means not occurring at the same time. And we all know what that means, but I just kind of wanted to fluff it up with asynchronous communication. What that basically means is master email, master texting, right? Because asynchronous allows you to communicate one way. Don't demand to pick up the phone right away. Because once you're talking live with people, or you're talking in a forum, or you're with a bunch of people, emotion takes its course. Thought processes get skewed. You don't have time to actually think about what you're going to write. Think about it back in the day. Benjamin Franklin, all those people, they had a feather and they were writing everything out, right? And they could posture their thoughts. They could pull back and get their emotions in check, and they would give it to the horse guy and he would take it down the road. But they took lots of time architecting emails with a feather pen, right? Well, we don't have to use a feather pen. We don't have to write letters. We can go right on the electronic mail system and create beautiful documents, thinking about the other person's position and our position. We can take our time and artfully craft text messages. You know, some of my best friends and I only really talk through text messages until it's time to have dinner or do something that's non-communicating or stressful in that regards. And I just want to challenge you that asynchronous communication will help grow you and to embrace those things and allow you to do what we call batch tasking, doing things in communication in batches. Because when we toggle from job to different thoughts, we wear our brain out. We get tired. We get fatigued. I want you to start thinking asynchronously, communicating asynchronously. I want you to start working in batches. And I want you to start taking control of your schedule. These are the most successful people in the world's ways of doing things. And I'm committed to continuing to get better at that. And I want you to figure out how you can get better at those things, because I want you to get better. I want you to make progress, not excuses. And I want to wrap this up because I just love what I do. I love talking about these things. And I want to wrap it up because communication and the mastery encompasses all of these things. I want you to understand how important that is. I want you to understand that when we come into conclusion with all this, and we think about how important our life is and how important we are to other people, I think about the fact that I almost wimped out, right? And didn't embrace a whole nother country 10 hours away and embrace a culture that was reaching out for some help because I was making excuses. To think that I wasn't using any of these 6 principles I was going to teach you today. Oh man, that's not the wired differently way. So I want you to understand that these principles, these 6 progress moves are very important. But I want you to understand how important they are if you just do this layover practice. I want you to know. Because these 6 progress moves are probably more important when it comes to how you talk to God. You need to master the communication through these 6 processes. Because if you think about critical work requires critical starts, right? And critical work and critical starts start every morning with God. Critical work, critical starts start every morning with God. Make your bed. Talk to God. Number 2, loop them all. I mean, what better person, what better spirit, what better influence than to loop God into your feedback loop, right? In first principle reasoning, the first principle is God. Use God in your first principle. Use God as your root. Use God as the all be all tell all. The 10 commandments, use them. He's got it all laid out there. Why would you need any other first principle than God? Come on now. Then talk about Stretch Armstrong goals. Hey, if you're going to set Stretch Armstrong goals, why wouldn't you set them so big that you're going to need God? Come on. If you got Stretch Armstrong and you're sleeping with Stretch Armstrong and you're setting Stretch Armstrong goals, you need a Stretch Armstrong God to be beside you. I mean, why would we even bother? Come on now. And to set your mind on growth, tell me something about setting your mind on growth. If you're setting your mind on growth, and your mind on growth is with God involved in that, his principles, his luxuries, his lives, his rewards, his support. I mean, come on, if that's not mind growth set, I don't know what mind growth set is. I mean, I tried not to go off this entire show, but I figured if I got this far, I might just make it, but I can't, because it's so logical to me that if I'm going to spend my time on 6 progress moves and not tell you the most important piece on every one of these moves that were perfectly designed for God to be involved, I would be a failure. In communication, asynchronously communicate with God. You talk to him, he'll talk back to you. Thank you for being wired differently. Hey, I love you. I want to inspire you. I want to motivate you. Catch me on my podcast on iTunes right now. Catch me on my podcast on Spotify right now. You can listen to these shows on Spotify and iTunes in a podcast. Great intro, great outro. It's amazing. And right now, I want you to also understand, if you guys DM me today, I'm going to send you a Wired Differently shirt. I'm going to send it to you. It's on me. I just want you to join my YouTube channel, subscribe, and I'd love to have you have the shirt. This is a lot of fun, Wired Differently. We're doing this thing called Life Together, Wired Differently. God's involved, you're involved, I'm involved, and we're growing, we're making money, we're growing our families, we're growing lives, and we're moving through this thing called life together. This movement, this ministry is going to be a blast, and I don't want you to miss it, because I'm not going to let you down, because I'm